Namaste, good evening. Welcome back to Super 30, RATA's 30-minute program on super packed information, all about everything that matters the HVAC industry. इस 30 मिनट में हम हमारी इंडस्ट्री के ऐसे छोटे मुद्दे उठाएंगे और डिस्कस करेंगे जिससे आपके बिजनेस में इम्पैक्ट होगा. The Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Trade Association, 72-year-old organization, only for the MSMEs in the field of air conditioning and refrigeration across India. आज के तारीख में हमारे 13 कमिटियां हैं और लगभग 1000 कंपनियां हमारी मेंबर हैं. So that is all about the association, and we are very fortunate that we have CEEW who has partnered with us to bring in this Super 30 program, and this is episode number 5. So let's hear from Miss Shikha Basin. Hello, Shikha. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you for having us back. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So, Shikha, you're going to introduce and tell us about CEEW. And of course, the topic today is all about the changing consumer behavior. So you're going to tell us how you came up with this document and what are the outcomes of it. So over to you, Shikha.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and a very warm good evening to everybody. I hope you're all keeping well, and thank you for being with us today. तो आज मैं आपसे बात करने वाली हूँ 2 स्टडीज जो CEEW में हमने 2020 में करी थी. बेसिकली हमने काफी लार्ज स्केल सर्वे उठाए थे. हम जानना चाह रहे थे कि भारत देश में क्या कंज्यूमर्स सोचते हैं एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी के बारे में, किस टाइप के अप्लायंसेस लोग खरीद रहे हैं, उनके क्या विचार हैं, कितना ट्रस्ट है इन गवर्नमेंट प्रोग्राम्स में, एंड क्या वजहें हैं जिसके लिए वो ऐसी अप्लायंसेस खरीदते हैं या नहीं खरीदते हैं. तो इसीलिए आप देख रहे हैं क्योंकि ये 2 अलग स्टडीज की जाई थी. यहाँ पे 2 नाम है, एक मैं हूँ शिखा भसीन और एक मेरी कॉलीग है शालू अग्रवाल जी, जो पावर सेक्टर टीम में काम करती है हमारे CEEW में. And before I go forward in telling you more about the actual findings, if I can take 30 seconds to also introduce the Council on Energy, Environment and Water to all of you. CEEW is amongst Asia's leading policy research institutions. We use extensive amounts of primary data as well as integrated analysis and strategic outreach to try and understand, explain and change the use, reuse and the misuse of resources. So जैसे आप देख सकते हैं काफी environmental issues को solve करने की हमारी themes हैं, हमारी teams हैं, जैसे हम power sector, renewable energy, long term low carbon pathways जो कि modeling team है हमारी, काफी अलग-अलग साइड से हम different environmental issues को देखते हैं. लेकिन at the heart of all of our work there is a sensibility कि जैसे हम environmental issues को solve करें, हम इनको कैसे सॉल्व करें ताकि हमारी जो इंडस्ट्री है, जो इंडिया की इंडस्ट्री है, जो इंडिया का डेवलपमेंट एजेंडा है कंट्री की ग्रोथ के लिए, पॉपुलेशन के इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के लिए, how do we solve our environmental programs while making sure that the country's jobs, competitiveness and growth is also getting benefited along with sustainability. So I'm a part of the technology, finance and trade team, and मैं हमारा climate negotiations का काम as well as sustainable cooling का काम देखती हूँ. And एक चीज जो हम लोग देख रहे हैं पिछले काफी सालों से, आपने प्रीवियस सुपर 30 सेशंस में भी सुना है कि बहुत सारी पॉलिसीज अब आ रही हैं जो कूलिंग को देखती हैं, सस्टेनेबल कूलिंग को देखती हैं, बिकॉज हम सबको मालूम है कि एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी बढ़ती जा रही है. जो मैंडेट है एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी का कंपनीज पे, प्रोडक्ट्स पे बढ़ता जा रहा है, और दूसरी तरफ रेफ्रिजरेंट ट्रांजिशन होने वाला है मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल के अंडर, which basically means कि जो अभी हम components यूज कर रहे हैं वो components थोड़ी बहुत बदलेंगे. और तीसरा अभी एक चीज हो रहा है जैसे कि IoT, इंटरनेट ऑफ थिंग्स आ रहे हैं, तो खूब सारी चेंजेस और बदलाव आ रहे हैं. और at the heart of all of these changes, right, एक तो हमारा सप्लाई साइड है, और अभी जो गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसीज हैं वो जनरली सप्लाई साइड पे ही इम्पैक्ट दे रही हैं, आपकी कंपनीज पे ही उनका प्रभाव पड़ रहा है. तो हम यही समझना चाहते थे कि जैसे जैसे ये मैंडेट्स, पॉलिसी रिक्वायरमेंट्स बढ़ती जाएंगी, उसमें कंज्यूमर्स क्या सोचते हैं. So to understand the consumer side of behavior, to understand their choices and their opinions when it comes to energy efficient appliances, we undertook two quite extensive surveys. एक सर्वे सर्विसिंग सेक्टर पे फोकस था, और दूसरा है इंडियाज रेजिडेंशियल इलेक्ट्रिसिटी सर्वे, विच इज द लार्जेस्ट ऑफ इट्स काइंड, दैट वाज अंडरटेकन बाय माय कॉलीग शालू, हु आई मेंशन्ड अर्लियर. तो वी रियली वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि पूरे भारत देश में लोगों को क्या क्या सोचना है व्हेन इट कम्स टू यूजिंग इलेक्ट्रिक अप्लायंसेस. And what we found was, let me quickly jump to the next slide. What we found was that overall in India, right, the star labeling program, जो कि सिर्फ एसीज पे ही नहीं, हमारे लाइट्स पे है, हमारे फ्रिज पे है, और अभी जून से हमारे फैंस पर भी आएगा, मैंडेट होने वाला है ये. तो रिप्रेजेंटेटिव जो सर्वे हुआ था, जो आइरिस सर्वे हुआ था, जो शालू जी ने लिया था, उनको ये पता लगा कि 25% भारत देश में घरों में अवेयरनेस है जो बीईई का स्टार लेबल प्रोग्राम है. और जैसा आप देख सकते हैं, जो डेंसिटी है वो रिचर, ज्यादा पॉपुलस और ज्यादा इन स्टेट्स में ज्यादा है, जैसे कि जो आपके जिसमें टियर 1 ज्यादा आते हैं, राइट. सो दिल्ली, महाराष्ट्र, हिमाचल, केरला, यहाँ पे 40% से ज्यादा लोग जानते हैं बीई के स्टार लेबल प्रोग्राम, इस स्टिकर को पहचानते हैं वो. और इन्हीं स्टेट्स में से अगर हम और भीतर जाएं इस डेटा में, तो हमें ये पता लगता है कि जितना लोग ज्यादा कमाते हैं और ज्यादा एजुकेटेड हैं, वो उतने ज्यादा अवेयर भी हैं. तो हमें इस चीज से ये पता लगता है, और ये हमने बीईई से भी बात की है, कि बिकॉज द फोकस हैज बीन मच मोर ऑन अ यंगर, ऑन अ मोर richer, much more educated population, the efforts must be made of future awareness programs to go towards the rural parts of the country, right? We need to start looking not just at tier 1, 2, and 3 cities, but really at smaller towns, smaller villages, and definitely at population segments which are not as educated and don't come from as high a socio-economic background. So this is across India, across appliances when it comes to the star labeling program. Then a second study that we had done, which I mentioned, जो हमने सिर्फ सर्विस सेक्टर को लेके उठाया था. तो इस वाले सर्वे में we only went to household. हम करीब 450 हाउस से हमने बात की थी, पर इन सारे घरों में एसी था. ये सब हाउस होल्ड्स ने एक एसी खरीदा हुआ था कम से कम 2 साल के लिए. तो वहां पर जब हमने पूछा, तो वहां पे हमें पता लगा कि मोर देन 75%, राइट. तो पूरे भारत में 25%, बट जिन लोगों ने एसी लिया हुआ है, जो ऑब्वियसली उनकी कमाई भी उतनी ज्यादा है एज कम्पेयर टू पूरा पॉपुलेशन, तो उस सेगमेंट में 75% of the people were very aware of the star labeling program. Most of them also thought that the star labeling program is a good program. It's a trustworthy program. जो information इन स्टिकर से उनको मिल रहा है, जो गवर्नमेंट ऑथेंटिकेटेड इंफॉर्मेशन है, उनको इस पे भरोसा है. और परचेज चॉइस में भी उनको लगा कि ये एक यूजफुल चीज है, अच्छी बात है कि ये स्टार लेबलिंग है, ताकि उनको पता लग सके एनर्जी रेटिंग्स के बारे में. एंड इसी पूरे परसेंटेज ऑफ पॉपुलेशन में more than 71% of the people wanted to buy a star labeled or a high star labeled AC, right? More than 70% wanted to buy a high star labeled AC, but unfortunately, only less than, sorry, I've skipped the slide, but unfortunately, only less than 15% were able, from this subset, were able to afford a high star, a high star AC, yes.
So Shika, before you move to that next one, I just have a question. कि आप मैंने खरीदा तो मैंने 5 स्टार का एसी है या 3 स्टार का है, ठीक है, लेकिन एक एसी में लगभग उसका लाइफ साइकिल 8 साल या 10 साल चलता है. That's the life cycle. We talk about 8 to 10 years or maybe even more in our Indian conditions and everything.
Yeah.
अब ये एसी जो जब मैंने खरीदा 3 स्टार है, ये पूरे लाइफ साइकिल में 3 स्टार रहता है? क्योंकि फ्रॉम माय एक्सपीरियंस आई हैव सीन कि बहुत से एसी within 2-3 years ये 3 स्टार ये 5 स्टार था जब खरीदा, और फिर 3 साल में वो 2 स्टार और 2 स्टार या 3 स्टार हो जाता है. So अब, I mean, how much can I trust this labeling program? Is it worth trusting? What are the safeguards from a consumer's perspective?
So, there are 2 points here, right? One is because you are from the HVAC sector, you can see that the performance is dipping, right? And that is one aspect of it, that the performance does dip over time because customers are not told that, if you're not going to service your ACs regularly, the efficiency will drop. राइट तो लोग एसी तो खरीद लेते हैं क्योंकि उनको लगता है अच्छी उनकी इलेक्ट्रिक बिल पे सेविंग्स होएगी, बहुत एसी यूज होता है, so on and so forth. But that information is incomplete, right? So if most people are not going to be undertaking appropriate good servicing practices at least twice a year, the efficiency of the unit is not going to run. And that is not something that will only happen from year 3. That will happen in the first 2 years. But in the first 2 years, because the guarantees and the services are given for free, वो हो जाते हैं पहले 2 साल में क्योंकि free service मिलती है लोगों को. The other point that you're making is that a 5-star gets demoted to a 4-star or a 3-star, right? Now that's
So let me correct
policy
you. I'm
strategy.
not the only guy who is saying it. Some of our viewers have already started putting it up.
Yeah,
They
and
said,
it
"What
will
are you
become
saying, Ajit?
0
Why
star.
2 star, 3 star? It can become a 0 star."
It
And these are
can
all people who are
actually,
from the industry.
exactly, because we understand that almost like 80, actually, it could be even worse, right? It could be greater than 80%, and it is completely contingent on good installation practices and good servicing practices. And it is keeping this in mind that we actually ran this study because we really wanted to understand what is the baseline. What do people understand about the connection between energy efficiency and services? And there is none. They don't think there is any connection between the two. So this is also where the consumer awareness program lags, right? Because if the government is training the retailers, and in the slides ahead, I'll show that the retailer actually plays a very important role. But if the retailer is only giving information about the product and not about the maintenance of the product, where is the customer supposed to find out about this? So yeah, so as you will see, for the products, right? And again, this has a lot to do with the fact that there is that sort of trust that has been instilled towards this program, and there has been extensive retailer programs, which we think have been, very, very successful in our country. That the Bureau has run, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has run these programs for retailers specifically. Companies also run these retailer programs, and what we have found is that the labeled products that have sold, right, the higher star labeled products that have been sold more extensively in the country, come under the mandatory labeling program. So if it is just voluntary, I think the emphasis on the trainings is also not that high. The minute it becomes mandatory and you don't have an option of going towards the informal economy or an informal setup, and you can see the sort of like percentages of people who have gone towards higher efficiency or branded appliances. And I think India has run a very successful program when it comes to the lights. We are very far behind in our ceiling fans. We are also very, very behind in our air conditioners. And I do think that, when it comes to sustainable cooling and heating technologies, which is the other side of it, there is an emphasis required to really kind of push for greater sales, but also much better maintenance, as someone mentioned that in a few years it will be down to zero without proper maintenance of these products. So with that, I want to go to the other point, right? That why is it, what are the most important decision parameters? Because you might have a very well aware consumer base, you might have a very well trained retailer base, right, which is giving all of this information on energy efficiencies, so on and so forth. But what we do find is that appliance cost is the biggest hindrance, the largest hindrance to people actually being able to afford and going ahead and purchasing a high star equipment. Now, this data has again been conducted across appliances, across countries, but as I was mentioning, we also found very similar data when it came to the star labeling appliance, the star labeling program that was run specifically for air conditioners, right? We found that of the percent of the population that wanted to buy, that we surveyed, they wanted to buy a high star AC, and less than 15% were able to afford it. And that in itself is a very big opportunity for us to really think about, how are we branding it, how are we positioning it, what are the kind of financing mechanisms and business models we really need to be thinking about, going forward. Because one of the things, and this is where it gets really interesting, and it really does come down to the budgets that households allocate, is that every single attribute, right, from your brand to your tonnage to the gas to the warranty schemes, all of those are considered very seriously at the time of purchase. However, pricing is the one that is decided on before, right? So as households, um, everything else is up for, the retailer being able to give them advice, other people being able to give them advice at the time of the purchase. But the one thing that remains a non-negotiable is the actual budget, right, that the household is ready to spend. And so we really need to make the pricing a lot more competitive of higher efficiency appliances as compared to the medium or the low or the non-efficient appliances that actually, or the inefficient appliances that actually exist in the Indian market today. That then brings us, to how do consumers also use their air conditioners, right? Now, a lot of them want to buy it. Very few of them are able to buy it. But even of the ones that are able to buy it, they don't actually know that installation and maintenance makes a difference to their AC's efficiencies. And like in this crowd, in this audience, I don't have to emphasize the importance of servicing. But very few customers and consumers in India and across emerging economies are aware of the role that good installation and maintenance plays in enhancing the efficiency and the longevity of the appliance itself. We also checked with these households that we had surveyed, how were they using their ACs? And this is where you see a lot of mismatch, right, in the information. Like some people have a little bit of information, some people have information that is incorrect, and most people have no information at all. And that was our sort of big takeaway, going forward for the government and for companies to really think about. So we know that only 40% of ACs run their temperature at a degree setting of 24 degrees or upwards, right? We also heard from a few households that actually running our ACs at 18 degrees or at 16 degrees is good. It's good for the appliance and it's good for the environment. So there is a mismatch in what is right information and wrong information. Only 20% of the ACs of the AC owners were using their air conditioners with a ceiling fan, right? This again becomes an important and an interesting area for SMEs and companies to really think about, right? Like if your AC needs to be run with a ceiling fan, and if this is the customer awareness you're putting out, then should high efficient ACs not be sold in a combined package with like high efficient ceiling fans, because you do need both to keep your electricity savings low. And then finally, unfortunately, only 55% of the households get their AC serviced by a technician every year. So as you see, there is a lot of misinformation. And it's what my colleague in his paper, Dr. Vaibhav Chaturvedi, labeled, it's the problem of lemons. So much information exists that what do we believe is the right information and what is the wrong information, and should we act on either of those, right? Like, so there is, I think there's a lot of appetite to build on a customer awareness program, a customer engagement scheme, not just from the government side, but also from industry association side, to really think about, what are the opportunities here, not just for advocacy and, creating awareness, but also for increasing, or bringing in newer business models of operation.
Amazing. In fact, I'm so glad that you brought out those three important points. And I can echo that with all of us in the industry who's been talking about it, 24 degrees. I know we have a society who ran a campaign. We all supported it to engage with the customers and say that, keep it at 24 degrees and see the difference it will bring down. But see, the problem is, this is something, it's a joke, I need to keep my AC at 18 degrees and then put a blanket over and go to sleep. That's very strange, but that mindset needs to change. That's one thing. And second, using the fan. Very few people understand that, air circulation plays a huge impact when it comes to comfort. It's just not the temperature. And the
Yeah,
combination of that can make a huge impact that, you keep it at 24 or keep it at 26, but run that fan on that one speed and you'll feel exactly the same, and your energy bills can come down by almost 20%, 25%. And that has a huge impact, and
yep.
servicing. And that is one area that we're just trying to tell everybody, get all these three together, and you're looking at a clear 30% energy consumption reduction. And that
Yeah,
is what you can do. And I
yeah.
guess I'm glad that you brought that out, because this is something that even at the association we're trying to do from a consumer education perspective, that you got to do this, you got to do this, and we keep repeating it again and again.
Yeah, because the point is, no household owner or like AC owner is going to suddenly dream up of this information one day, right? Like someone needs
That's
to
right.
deliver this information, and that really is. But I think before we can deliver that information, first of all, we need to understand what the practices are, right? Which is what I'm trying to sort of share with all of you here. And it's like what you have said, like if you're talking about a 30% saving, it's exactly information like that that needs to be delivered to the customer, because the customer is not interested in knowing how the rest of India uses their ACs necessarily, but they are interested in knowing how their practices will make a difference to their own electricity savings, but also to the energy efforts that the country is undertaking.
Amazing.
And
Keep it.
so with that, actually, and we've discussed some of this, this is really what we think is required, right? We need a program like the retailer and the consumer awareness program that BEE has undertaken for its star labeling appliances, but we think it needs to go beyond just tier one, tier two cities, and it needs to target within these cities and nationally, um, populations that are not yet buying these appliances but very much aspire to. You see, like sustainable cooling and cooling requiring cooling is no longer a luxury. With the kind of heat stress that our country faces, this is definitely an area of investment for a lot of households that is considered, and that's why the budgetary amounts are very important to think about. um, but before I get to the financing, I do think that we need to have this customer awareness and engagement program run, across different languages, across city sizes, and dedicated to people at different levels of socioeconomic settings. We need to be able to inform people that there is a connection between energy efficiency and servicing. Right. So if you're not going to service your appliance, you're not going to be accruing the energy savings that you have invested towards. Finally, we need to be able to put out data as what you just said, Mr. Panikar, right? If you're running it with a fan, if you're running it, for a particular amount of, at a particular temperature, these are the kind of cost benefits and the savings that you're talking about, in different climatic zones. And we need studies of this kind to happen. I do believe that putting out information like this is not just good for, the energy charter of our country or for customers who want to save on their electricity bills, but it's also really good for companies like all of you who are present on this call today, because the investments you're making towards energy efficiency are also coming back to you, because people are going to be interested in buying that product a lot more because they understand the value of it a lot more. Having said that, I do think that a greater emphasis is required to make energy efficient appliances affordable. We need to have a labeling program targeted at fans. 90% of India's households owns a fan, right? This is a staggering number of households that have access to a fan. And as we move towards mandating a star labeling scheme dedicated to ceiling fans, we also need to ensure that the GST that is being applied on 4 and 5 star appliances is placed at a level that allows them to be competitive with appliances that are not as efficient. I mean, that really is, I think, a fair thing to ask for. I understand that across the HVAC sector, this has been a pain point. It has been an area of advocacy across companies and industry associations that has targeted the government of India. Um, but I think perhaps with the coming of fans, a more concerted effort from industries that fall under HVAC across different product lines, perhaps that's an area, for us to then rethink the advocacy strategy to push for this once again. Of course, things like public procurement, bulk procurement programs, which we've seen a few of. These need to be put forward in greater detail. We also know that there is perhaps going to be a greater movement towards sustainable cooling technologies, as we've seen EESL run in the last year, and then before that. As well, there was another bulk procurement scheme that they had run as well. So, encouraging more and more schemes to come forth on that. But then again, here is an opportunity for us to prove to the government that it also makes a difference, right? I mean, the government should be investing in schemes like this, but there should be a sunset clause also associated to it, because cooling is not the only development challenge that India is facing. Then put up retail models for bulk and no cost finance, right? And this is where you do a similar thing without the government and like tax money getting involved. So can industry associations and can a group of companies come together to actually develop retail models that allow for bulk procurement schemes to come in, without additional cost to the customer themselves. This becomes one area. Another idea that we sort of thought, and I think it's been discussed a lot, is incentivizing financial institutions to give concessional loans towards this, right? And I don't think this will necessarily happen at a household level, but perhaps for commercial air conditioning, this could be an option to encourage greater rollout of efficient, technologies for cooling and heating. Finally, the availability of these products needs to be mandated, right? And I missed sort of talking about this point when I was saying that the products that fall under the labeling program that are mandatory um, have been bought more. And one of the reasons for that is because the products that are only under the voluntary sort of scheme of the labeling program, they are not available in the market as much because it's not a mandate. The market placement is relegated only to, the really big retailers and across the bigger cities, and don't really find their way into smaller cities, and accessibility is limited over there. Finally, we need to really start looking at a supply chain upgradation for the HVAC sector in entirety, right? Like we know that a PLI scheme has come in, there has been emphasis on it. This has been a topic of conversation, between the CEEW and RATA Super 30 sessions, significantly, across the last 4 conversations that we've all had. That how is the PLI scheme actually incentivizing the upgradation of the entire supply chain? And based on what we know, can we as industry associations and neutral knowledge brokers get together and actually advocate with the government to ensure that it is the supply chain that is getting benefited and not just the largest OEMs, who already have a large market share? And then finally, we need a piloting of technologies. I mentioned the efficiency transition, the IoT transition, the refrigerant transition, and the sheer demand of the Indian cooling market that is set to explode, right? We know that 7% of households at most own an air conditioner. And we know that 90% of the population has access to fans. But the market bridge between that, right, which includes your sort of evaporative air coolers and will likely include a host of other types of technologies, in the next few years to come. How do we as industry, neutral knowledge brokers, as well as government come together to actually pilot these out in the public domain so that everybody knows which way we should be moving? And then finally, of course, operations and maintenance. This is something that is very close to what we do at CEEW. We really believe that the servicing sector needs to be looked at, and needs to be given the encouragement and the tools to be able to deploy good servicing practices at scale across the country. But for that, we also need demand, to come in from the customer side.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shikha. So that was a fabulous insight on consumer behavior, and that also just being delivered in the month of Feb, where you have just 30 days before the season breaks out. And after 2 years, probably this is the first time we don't have a lockdown during the season. Otherwise, usually Jan, Feb, we usually go for a shutdown. So we're really looking forward to it. So before we wind up, we have been making multiple representations to the government to bring that GST from 28 to 18%. And we've been trying to explain to the government, saying that, listen, it is a growth trajectory. You will not have a loss of revenue. The business will grow. You will benefit. What, according to you, is the only reason that's stopping the government from making that 28 to 18? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, but of course, these are just my thoughts, right? This is not an answer on behalf of any government stakeholder, but my understanding of it is that because these ACs, AC ownership in general is a very privileged number in India still, right?
Seriously. Even
Yeah,
in
so
21st century, air conditioning is
yeah,
privileged in our country. I mean, a
it's
tropical
a
country
very
like ours.
Yeah, and it's a very, very, very small subset of people and households that own an air conditioner, right? And I do think that that is the only reason that it has not been dropped, right? Like, so that encouragement is not being given to the HVAC industry in entirety because they believe that the market segment that it is catering to is very low. But this is exactly what I was also trying to say, right? That with the coming in of fans, and if we can join hands with industry associations that go beyond AC manufacturers, and refrigerant manufacturers, and join hands with organizations that look at customer awareness and customer usage of electricity-based appliances, that look at the manufacturing of fans and other appliances, right? If we could join hands with all of these actors, um, and then put forward the same clause, because we know that fans are soon going to fall under the labeling program, right? And that is not a privileged number. Across India, people need a fan and will rely on a fan, regardless of any other movement that happens in the cooling technology space. So I do think that perhaps that is an opportunity, that is due this year for us to look into.
Amazing. Awesome, Shikha. Thank you so much. That's the time we've had today, and we've covered quite a bit about it. And hopefully, we pray that that in a tropical country like ours, this privilege tag is out, and not just 7% of our population, but maybe 50, 60% of our population should be able to get comfort for themselves, because we consider that air-conditioned environments brings in productivity. That's the biggest thing,
Absolutely.
and I hope that change happens. So thank you so much, Shikha, and we're going to get back to you again next month, hopefully on the 1st of March as a schedule, with a new topic over the next 30 minutes, things that impact your business on HVAC. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Shikha. Thank you very
Thank you
much for
so
being here.
much.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye.